Welcome to Whispers to a Bride, where we talk about the stuff no one else is talking about. We are going deep on the emotional aspects of getting married, the stress, drama, and turbulence that affects your own sense of identity and your closest relationships. We are talking about what it means to be a bride and how to navigate this sacred time with more grace and ease. I'm your host, Kara Gassabay. As a life coach and therapist, I'm going to be sharing super practical tips so that you can not only rise to the occasion of your wedding, but also your life. Hello, and welcome back to Whispers to a Bride. I am Kara, and today we are talking about bride as disruptor. I feel like obviously there was so much swirling about Meghan and Harry with the Netflix series that came out and the book that everyone is like reading 400 pages of Harry's book. I'm super fascinated by it. Like, obviously, just the royal part. I was a big Crown fan and I lived in England for a year. So I love sort of all things British, and then weddings and just the drama of it all. Obviously, you know, I am like way invested in this storyline. And I might do like an episode just maybe about it because I feel like there's so many like amazing, interesting themes that do apply to all of us, even though these people are living a life that is like super not the norm. But what I kept getting like the past couple of weeks is just this idea of like, Meghan is a disruptor. She's a disruptor. And I'm like, why am I using that language? And I think it's just because we live in this time, right, of all of this technology and all of these new companies changing industries. So I was like, okay, let me just look up and make sure I have the concept correct. And they define it, if a company is considered a disruptor or is being disruptive, it has found an innovative way of doing business in an existing sector or creating a new market, in the process, shaking up the status quo. Many organizations have been described as disruptive, but the label only is really justified when a company permanently disrupts the existing sector, forcing the established businesses to change their approach. So you can see how Meghan, in her bridal moment, was the ultimate disruptor, right? She really changed the game of how a royal wedding and marriage would go. Obviously, I'm not saying that Meghan came in and changed everything and lit a match and started a bunch of drama. That's a lot of people's storyline. Obviously, when you hear from Harry, he was ready to go. Like, he was game. He wanted to change his approach to royal life and identity. And I think that he found a partner that made that really possible for him. That is sort of how I read the situation, of course, with the caveat that, like, let's not pretend like we know these people personally and can judge and speak on them. But just sort of watching from a storyline point of view, that's how it really feels to me. And the way in which this family is so public and so historical and so global and has just been a part of the conversation in America, obviously in overseas, we can so easily see it and we can understand the discomfort that it brings when this wedding, right, and this bride sort of starts this big disruptive phase. And when they decided to step away from royal duties and then step away from living in the country and all of that stuff, obviously was very disruptive. It remains to be seen in terms of like the monarchy as a whole, but there are some feelings that like this could have lasting effects. And obviously there's a lot of like really hard, sad stuff with the brothers' relationship. I mean, I need to do just like a whole podcast episode on the brotherly thing because, you know, siblings and weddings and all the things that can happen. But overall, I just wanted to focus today on this notion of bride as disruptor, because even if it's not at the Megan Markle scale in terms of causing a big shift in Harry's family and a change, and like I said, might potentially have very lasting effects that could be very interesting geopolitically. Again, I'm so just intrigued by it and proud of anybody who stands up for what they believe in and does what they want to do. It just really reminded me that like all of us as a bride in a very different way, but also not that different. Our role and function in that bridal moment ends up being as a disruptor. And again, let's not get confused. This is not a bad thing. Disruption, sort of on its face, can feel like it's a bad thing, especially if you're like me and you really cling to the ideas of like stability and peace and calm. Disruption feels a bit jarring and overwhelming and unsavory. But if you think about like these tech companies that are like major industry disruptors, some of these entrepreneurial moments, these things that come out and they change the way things are done. They change the way we see things. They change the way the world operates. And it's really exciting, right? Because so many beautiful, new, wonderful things come when the status quo is disrupted in this way. And as a bride, you are marrying your partner and you end up being a disruptor in that existing family and friend sort of social ecosystem. So when you enter someone's family, the status quo like doesn't always hold when you add a new member. And of course, based on your personality, based on your in-laws and your family dynamics, like this can feel and look very differently. But I just sort of wanted to give you this idea to kind of just having as a framework that, yeah, like not to take it as personally, but it's a more of a role. It's a global more, it's not you personally. It's just the situation and the role that you're playing when you are changing the fabric of a family, right? It's disruptive and that can be really kind of cool. And it's also going to cause some discomfort. So entering someone's family dynamic, like I had a client the other day, this is a great example. Like she's like, I like to talk about my feelings and sit down and have conversations very in the open about what we're grappling with. And she was noticing that in her fiance's family, you don't just sit down and hash it out. Like if we're having a disagreement about the venue or the menu for the wedding day, it was like a game of telephone. It was like, okay, the mom would tell the dad would tell the fiance, and the fiance would tell her. She's like, okay, but also isn't it just better if we just sit down and really talk about it? And I say really how I feel and what I want, and I let them say really how they feel and what they want, and then kind of try to come to a compromise, or at least say very clearly, this is what's going to happen. I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree, and I'm going to proceed. Just something to bring like real clarity. And she was noticing like it feels like dynamite, right? In their existing family dynamic, the way that they've always done it for years. This isn't how it's done. And she's just like, what feels very natural way of existing for her is a bit of a disruption for her fiance's family. Now, it's double-sided. Like on one hand, it's like, oh gosh, like she's having these conversations and people are feeling a little uneasy. It feels a little abrupt. It feels a little confronting. But also, wow, in some ways they're noticing this is kind of easier and it takes away that whole game of telephone and miscommunication. And instead of dragging on for weeks with tidbits of drips and drabs of information, we're just like kind of hashing it out in 45 minutes. And so, right, there's both things. It's both kind of awkward and tough and icky, but also there's a freshness in like, hey, we can change our communication patterns for the better. And it was the entrance of this person on the scene that really helped us to have a spotlight on like maybe a little bit of like inefficient, ineffective, just not great communication patterns that, you know, you just do what you do until you do something different. And that's like the beauty of your disruptor role is that you can bring ease, you can bring clarity, you can bring just a whole energy that can be a huge, wonderful blessing to your new family. Also realizing that like some of it's just going to be hard. The fact that like you're always with their brother or sister or whatever is like kind of a drag. Like people will long for their old family dynamics and they'll sort of can be resentment and hard feelings like, oh, she's always here. It's not the way it used to be. It's not the family dynamic that we know so well and is like ingrained so deeply in our just like automatic operating style. So it can be really hard. And that's what I want you to just think about today. Also, the disruptor role, that's why it can feel like so intense. It's because it's in this moment that you're actually becoming an official part of someone else's family and getting this role of sister-in-law, daughter-in-law, like all of that stuff. Like, oh, it just happens when you get married. But like, it's a real shift that goes on energetically and practically and just relationally it's a big shift. And I think we sort of can underestimate what that means. There's lots of different expectations. People have all of these cultural narratives about like, oh, everybody hates their mother-in-law, or sister-in-laws are difficult, or just there's a lot that goes on with it. And so I just think it's important to give yourself that really big space to understand the role and see both sides, the ways in which it's really hard to be a disruptor and the ways in which it could be a beautiful opportunity to add a lot of beauty and love and sweetness to the family that you're entering, because you're already going to be bringing a lot of change. And no matter what, change is hard on people. So again, try to depersonalize it a little and try to just see it as, okay, this is that like disruptor part. And it doesn't mean anything's gone wrong, but we are disrupting the status quo. That is always going to happen when there is a wedding and when people are getting married. And let's sort of manage the tough parts and really lean into the good parts and try to focus on those so that we can see the assets of welcoming someone new into our family. I remember just my sister-in-law just thinking like, wow, it's never going to be the same. She's always going to be here and it's always going to throw off sort of the vibe of the family, like where it would be my brothers doing their thing. And then like my mom and my sister and I had like an ease and just like a way of being together that like, now we got to figure out this other female and like how to bring her in, but she's like different, but like it takes labor, right? It takes emotional labor. It could take logistical labor. But it's also worth it because it's a chance to kind of like, okay, let's change up how we do things and see what they can bring to the table and what they can add and what they can show you. And it's just bride is a disruptor. It's just really on my mind lately. Obviously, it started with the Megan thing, but it really feels like it applies to everyone. So I hope that gives you a different way to understand maybe your experience if you are running into some rough patches and feeling like, gosh, I don't mean to be causing so much upheaval, but it's just part of this moment in your life and in your role as a bride, especially as a female coming in. That has its own just whole storyline that goes with it, just based on gender norms and cultural construction. So that's why it's like especially poignant, I think, for us ladies. So yeah, I'm just curious what you guys think about that. I would love to hear. Please leave a review, rate and review. I am not going to do commercials on this podcast because I feel like they're sort of annoying. So to keep me from doing those, the more you guys can rate and review and share this podcast, it will do the work for us, right? We do not need to do anything else except spread the word to your fellow brides that you think could learn something from this and schedule your appointment. I have been getting so many beautiful phone calls with women struggling with the family dynamic stuff, but also that post-bridal blues. If you think this could be happening for you, set up your appointment now. It's a soft place to land after your wedding day. So much to process there. And yep, join the Bridal Prep Academy, book your appointment, shout me out on Instagram. I love to chat with you there. And I am all over TikTok these days. So find me, Kara the Bridal Coach. And until next time, I am wishing you nothing but bridal bliss. Take care. See you next time.